Yo, this hot, this the spot. There it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a comedy podcast for creators of any variety. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. Thanks for being here, very much appreciated, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing this episode with you. If this is your first time listening, thanks very much. You can catch old episodes of the podcast. They are all on iTunes and SoundCloud. You can read up on them on thereitispod.com. We also have blogs on thereitispod.com. And today's guest is Julia Claire. She is a stand-up comedian in New York City. Very funny. And it's making a lot of noise. I think she's someone to watch. She's got a lot going on for her. And I hope, if you haven't heard of her, that you check out her work. And this gives you a chance to really get to know someone new and great in the stand-up world. We talk a lot about that. We talk about a few other things. It's a fun chat. So let's get right to it. Here's my chat with Julia Claire. You're from Boston.
Yes.
Originally.
That's true.
You lived in Boston your whole life?
I lived in Massachusetts for almost all of my life. So I grew up in Medfield, Massachusetts, which is like 40 minutes outside of Boston. Mm-hmm. And and then I went to school in Baltimore, and then I came back. I moved back home after college, and then when I moved to Boston, I started doing stand-up after college.
Very cool.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I talk to someone from Boston, they'll say like, Brookline or whatever, and it's always like right outside of Boston. It's like something that's like 40 minutes away. What is not close to Boston that's in Massachusetts that people have heard about?
Well, actually, I lived in Brookline when I was little, before we moved to Medfield, and my dad is from there.
And Conan's from there.
Conan is from there. Conan and my dad are both Brookline High School graduates. And, the center of the universe in Massachusetts is Boston, definitely. Right. But there is, there's a lot outside. I think, like, Western Mass is so beautiful. And, like, the Cape is technically so close to get to from Boston. It's, like, 2 hours to the bridge, if
nice.
that. Maybe, like, an hour and a half. But, yeah, it's, everyone says they're from just outside of Boston because that's where we all are. That's where, like, most people live in the state.
No, I've never been. I'd like to check some places out.
It's great.
A good friend of mine is from there, and she's always going back and also raving about Boston. So.
People shit on it so much, and it deserves a lot of it, but it's also a very good place to live. I miss it a lot. I actually lived in Cambridge when I lived there, and I miss it so much all the time. It was just like, what a great place.
It's not super far from here to get there, right? Like,
it's 4 hours. It's like a little over 4 hours.
My friend goes so much that you would assume that it's like right around the corner.
Yeah.
Often as she goes.
I go back a decent amount, and on the bus it's like 4 hours and 15 minutes.
That's not so bad. It's not so bad.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. When did you move to New York? How long ago was that?
I moved to New York 2 years ago today.
Wow.
Exactly today.
But you've been doing comedy, you said, before that.
Yes.
How long have you been doing comedy now?
I just hit 4 years.
Wow.
So
awesome.
Did 4 years. I did 2 years in Boston and 2 years, exactly 2 years here in New York.
And you've done a ton in that time. I mean, Boston and New York, those are good. Obviously, New York is a great place for comedy, but Boston's a really great hub for comedy as well.
It is, and I think about this a lot, and I am so glad that I started there because I just see how hard it is to start here, and I think if I had started here, I might have quit. It's such a specific thing. The people who start here and keep at it and really succeed are
super sharp,
made of steel.
Yeah, they are.
But Boston is a really great place to start, just because it has like a long tradition of stand-up, and I think it's I think as a scene, it like prioritizes the right things. It's like,
that's good.
The writing is. I have so many friends who are still there who are like incredible writers, and just like are such fantastic performers too. And it's a kooky place. I don't know. I love it. But and then also there are, especially in the last 5 years or so, just so many awesome alt spaces and shows that have popped up, but the tradition in Boston is definitely like the clubby stand-up that that definitely exists, but it's not is
that the only place that people can go?
It's not, and I certainly I wasn't extremely enmeshed in the clubby part of Boston stand-up, but I mean it's all good. It's just like I miss it a lot. I go to Chicago a fair amount as well, and I think that in terms of quality of the scenes, like Chicago's much bigger city, much bigger scene, but I think in terms of the quality, it's totally comparable. It's just like Chicago's a lot more experimental than Boston is. Like you can be a lot more kind of like weird and creative in a way that our puritanical sensibilities in Boston are just start flashing. But it was just such a great place to start, and I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled that I can keep going back there.
I mean, you mentioned something in there about prioritizing the right things, and there are a ton of scenes that just crop up across the country that are sort of do it yourself. There isn't a club there in some of those places. But someone just said, well, I can go to this bar and just start an open mic. Yeah. And that's all great, and people should totally do that. But you really can't, if you want to start touring or anything, like actually make it a profession, you really can't shirk the responsibility of being around really strong people and some of those other things that you were talking about that are, prioritizing the right things. Like, what are some of the other things you're saying? I am assuming you mean really getting a true stage presence, really finding your voice, really getting good at writing material.
That's exactly it. And I think one of my first friends in the scene is a comic named Andrew Mayer, and he was a few years older than me, and he had just been doing it. He'd been doing stand-up since he was in college, and he, I just learned so much from him just by watching. And sometimes he would be at open mics and I'd be like freaking out because I was 3 months in being like, I'm horrible, and because I was, and
3 months in,
and he was just like, okay, no one is going to kick you out of comedy if you don't do well at this open mic. And I always remember that now, and I think it's true of even like shows. Like, if you have a mediocre set, not even bombing, but I think of mediocre set. When I have a mediocre set, I think about it for a month, and like a really tepid, just like milquetoast, like they were on the fence about me set. I'm just like, wow, I want to email each and every one of those people in the audience. But there was just like and there's a lot of great people who started in Boston who came back a lot. Josh Gondelman is one of them.
Josh is great.
He's the best.
He's been on. He's the nicest dude in the world.
He's one of my best friends, and I talk to him like every day, and he's just another just bottomless fountain of great advice and just like living by example and performing by example. And he's the best. Gary Gulman's another person who comes back a lot. And
also, it's such a like a monster on stage. That guy is incredible. And
so sometimes Gary would come back and just do these like tiny little bar shows if he was running a set for something. And so, yeah, to just be like so new in comedy and get to see him up close at this like shitty bar show was amazing.
Yeah.
And like Emma Willman is so great, and Emily Urskowski, who's still in Boston, is amazing. Kelly McFarlane is someone, she's still in Boston. She does a lot of touring in New England. Not a lot of people outside of New England know who she is, but she's a fucking destroyer. Like, I see her at Laugh Boston sometimes, and she just like, I like lose my mind. She's so funny. So there were like all these great people to look up to, and I think that's so important too. Is, you know, there are a lot of cities, I think, where people just like get to a certain level and then leave. And I think that really robs the next generation of comics from like being able to have people to look up to.
Yeah. I mean, my old scene, we got really lucky because the guy who started the open mics that we were going to, he, before he moved, I started in Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh, okay, cool.
And a guy was there, his name's Nick Shaheen. He moved to Atlanta. But he was doing all these shows and open mics and then bringing in people who were really good. So we got to see Joe Zimmerman was in Asheville, North Carolina, before he moved here. So we got to know him as just like like the workhorse of that area because he was always going out, and he would come to our open mics, you know. Yeah. But he was also a guy we saw headlining, and we got to open for. So it was just like insane. We'd also see him at the open mics, but. Rory Scovel and Josh Gondelman is how I met Josh Gondelman, because he came down to do a show that Nick brought him. And all these people, Joe DeRosa came a bunch of times. So a lot of people were really great, and we got to see that. If someone's in a scene like that, though, where it's not constant all the time, seeing someone on that level, then maybe you do need to move if you need to, if you want to do it as a career. But if you can make noise for yourself in an area, then that's obviously good. So I don't want to naysay that at all. But I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to see people who are that good. Because if you're just going to the open mics all the time, for one, you're seeing other people who are just trying to figure it out. Yeah. So you don't see the right way to do it. Not that people are doing it bad per se, but they're not Gary Goldman. Yeah. You know, like seeing whenever I go to Comedy Cellar, he's one of the people I see all the time here. Yeah, he's so great. Then you experience something else than when you go to the open mics. The other thing that I feel is kind of a detriment, and I see it happening here sometimes, is that people are just trying to work that room.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, you have a lot of like friends mics where it's like, you know, we all know people who crush at an open mic like the same one, and it's because everyone knows them and everyone has kind of a primer on who they are, and that's what makes it so funny. But yeah, I think especially what was cool about Boston is that you can absolutely get on stage every single night, at least once or twice a night if you want. Yeah. Which, you know, for a city that's like Boston and DC are the same size of cities, and like the scene in Boston I think is like proportionally pretty huge. There's like a lot of comics there, and there's a lot of shows and a lot of mics, and it's, you know, it was a good place to like cut. It's a great place to come up and be free to fail. Yeah. Which, boy, did I.
That's the thing in comedy. You have to fail a lot in order to really get ahead, which is the weirdest thing. It's like this my dad keeps talking about businesses that fail upwards. Like they start putting out bad product, but they keep getting more and more successful somehow. And that's kind of how comedy is. It's because you're going up and you're trying jokes and you don't know how they're going to go, and you're trying your style and you're trying your stage presence and you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. And then you are failing to go, oh, well, I shouldn't do it that way. I'll do it a little different. Yeah. I think the frustrating thing, though, with like the failing part is not really the frustrating part for me. The frustrating part is when you can't really get a gauge of the audience. And that sort of happens when you're in a room where nobody knows you and it's just comics and not a real audience who's there to like at least try to laugh. If you're not funny in front of an audience that's just there to laugh, then you can go, okay, that definitely didn't work. But it's not necessarily the case when it's just comics in the room who are just like thinking about their set. So what, I don't know if you've experienced that at all, but if so, like what sort of mindset do you get in so that you can know like, okay, this did not work and here's why and here's how I can improve it? How can you get a real gauge of that when nobody's laughing because they're not paying attention, not because it's not good?
I actually think that's one of the reasons why it is so important to start in
another
scene,
place
a
in New
scene
York.
that is not in New York.
I agree.
Because I think, you know, Boston didn't really have this, but I have seen this in Chicago. There's a lot of other scenes where like audience members will come to open mics. Like audience will come to open mics. Like my friend Molly Rubin Long started in New Orleans, and she used to host an open mic that would like have a big audience every week. Cole's open mic in Chicago on Wednesday gets a big audience. It's like we don't have anything like that in Boston, but it's like we definitely have people who were, you know, willing to listen, which is such a huge thing.
Yeah.
And it can just feel like New York can just feel like so much noise, I think.
Yeah.
It's so easy to tune things out. But I mean, when I do badly at an open mic, even if people are like not super paying attention, I try to take that with a grain of salt. It's just like, you know, people weren't really paying attention, but also my jokes probably weren't outstanding.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I think it's just a balanced approach. And usually, and I'm at the point now where like I write so much that I know if something is worth telling again or worth working on.
And that comes from just reps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, I've only been doing stand-up for 4 years, but it's like I write all the time, and I know, like, there are certain ideas where I'm like, I know this is funny, and I know I can make this work even if it's not working right now. And then there's a lot of other stuff where I'm just like, this was a glorified tweet, and I should never say it again.
I'll do the glorified tweets just to have, like, get a little laugh.
Yeah.
But then I did get to a point where I knew, well, I don't really need to do this again. Yeah. Because this was just like a one-off. It felt like a monologue joke in that sense.
Oh, sure.
Like, I'm not going to do this again.
Yeah.
It got what I needed to get out of it this time. But yeah, it is. That is the tough thing. I speaking of monologue jokes and kind of having a sense of things, when I went to see Fallon rehearse his monologue for The Tonight Show, and I may have told this story before in the podcast, but everyone was just laughing at everything. And I think it was just like the excitement of Jimmy Fallon, which was like so juxtaposed to the way, because I also saw Seth Meyers rehearse a monologue, and both were like great experiences. Both of them were just stellar. But going into the Seth Meyers one, they were saying, don't laugh if you don't think it's funny. We just want a good gauge. Like, laugh hard if you think it's funny, but don't if you don't think it's funny. They stress that.
That's very honorable.
Yeah. And I love both of them. And there was also sort of like, and it's, you know, they were making it real fun for the audience. They're like, he's going to come out and like give him a big round of applause. But that was the approach at late night. With Tonight Show, they just sort of like put us in a group. They were just like, okay, stand over here. We'll bring in there in a second. There was like no fanfare whatsoever. Yeah. And then they bring us in, and then Jimmy's already just sitting at his desk. It was a very casual experience, and they never really addressed us on like what we should do. It was just sort of, they're gonna rehearse things, go in there, have fun. All right, see it. You know, it was really that kind of vibe. So I felt like everyone just sort of was excited that they were there. It was the Tonight Show.
I would imagine that that's a more typical experience than what Seth does, probably.
Probably. Yeah. And what I thought was amazing, watching him, there were a couple jokes where like everyone laughed, and I thought, how is he really going to figure this out? And there were moments where you'd see him kind of look off to the side at some producer, and he would be like, sort of shrug. Like,
Yeah.
not a big reaction
Yeah.
from him. Just sort of like, that one's no good. It was like
Yeah.
everyone laughed at that. But he still was doing that thing of, I know this one's not going to go.
Yeah.
Let's not do that. I thought it gave me a lot more of an appreciation for him. But I think that is what someone has to get to.
Sure.
Is being able to say, this is really what it should be. I know that. And yeah, this is going well, but let's go for the cream of the crop here.
Well, I think all of the late night hosts are a little different, even though monologue is such a sort of prescriptive joke medium. I was, I've looked at all of them sort of like intently and individually, and the Tonight Show has its own legacy, so it's a very specific voice. It's a very classic, and also it's like Jimmy is a very particular personality. They all are. I think his is like a lot more classic. Seth's monologue is, he sits behind the desk and it's like Weekend Update style jokes, which I love.
I love too, yeah.
I mean, I think Seth is always, I love Seth so much. I really like them all. I do like them all, but I have a special place in my heart for Seth.
Yeah.
But James Corden is really interesting because his monologue, I think, is the most different from everyone just in structure. It's like
that's the one I don't watch.
So I hadn't watched it until recently, like really intently, and especially his monologue. I've seen a lot of his other sketches and things like that, but I didn't even realize that he did a monologue every night. But his monologue is so interesting because it's like, a typical monologue joke is just a really tight setup punchline, and
interesting.
With James Corden, it's like it is a setup and punchline, but there's always like an extra beat afterwards.
Oh, I see what you mean.
He stretches a little bit, and because I think that just like really meshes with his personality because he's like so fun and sort of like loose, and that's kind of who he is.
And the structure of the show is loose. It's just like we're all just going to sit here.
Yeah, and you're not going to see someone like Conan do that because he's,
Conan's more
a
of
tactician.
Yeah.
I love Conan.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Conan's my
incredible.
hero.
Yeah.
I love Conan. His monologue very much is like just straightforward jokes, and then he does his silliness. And it's almost like, I don't know, you could just tell he's got a writer's brain.
Oh, sure.
And not a stand-up sort of approach.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing about Seth, probably.
Yeah, but he because he did the Weekend Update, I think he's has a more of an in.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in how Colbert does his monologues because he's sort of loosey-goosey too, and he comes from a completely different place, almost.
Wasn't he an improviser?
He was an improviser for a long time, and all of them did improv, but he and Seth were the most known probably in the improv from like, I shouldn't say in the improv world, but I just mean when they really started getting a lot of attention, it was like in improv.
Yeah.
Before they started doing other stuff. And whereas Fallon has famously said he didn't finish at Groundlings, you know, and like Conan said he hated doing improv. He didn't think he was good at it.
And also, Jamie did stand up, but it was mostly impressions.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think Seth Meyers is so particularly primed for late night just because he was the head writer of SNL. And that's why I always say that, like, I love Colbert, but and she would have never done it, but I always think that, like, the perfect replacement for Letterman would have been Tina Fey.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't going to happen. I figured she would be on someone's list.
It was a fever dream.
She was never going to, because it'd be going up against Jimmy and Lorne.
Not
and
even that. I just think that, like, it's a punishing job.
Oh, yeah.
And she had, like, 2 young daughters.
True, yeah.
And also just, like, probably didn't want to do, like, just...
They maybe didn't even ask her.
Like, I'm sure they didn't ask her, but...
They kept it in-house, and I think they asked Jon Stewart. I know they asked Neil Patrick Harris.
Oh, my God. Well, maybe one day we'll have a woman on one of the major networks.
I've never heard anyone else say that. They may have asked someone else. At least they asked a gay man.
Yeah, I don't think that they. Oh, I assure you that they will ask every kind of man before they ask a woman to be the host of a major foreign late night show.
I was wanting when Conan was announced as Tonight Show. I said, well, Tina just signed a deal with NBC. Maybe she'll do late night.
Yeah.
But then that was when 30 Rock came in. So I thought, oh, okay, well, they got her in another angle. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. But
I thought it was a big missed opportunity to not have a woman host at least late show.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the networks are the major four networks, way less so on cable, obviously, because you have like Samantha Bee and Netflix. You now have Michelle Wolf and Sarah Silverman,
and we had Robin Thede for a little bit.
Yeah,
I know she got canceled. But.
But I think the major four networks are just like extremely risk averse in a very specific way, and that sucks. But
yeah, I feel like it's almost.
But I do love Colbert, and I
love all of them. Yeah, like Colbert, I love, and Conan, and Colbert's another hero, another South Carolina guy. So he's just always
that's true.
Been up there for me. I can't say that they were wrong for getting Fallon or Myers or Colbert, but it does just seem like if they were gonna go with someone that we didn't know for Late Show, then they could have gone with a woman. Or a person of color, because Arsenio's the closest we've had to on a major network.
So crazy. And that was 25 years ago?
And it was syndication.
Yeah.
And so in some markets he was on Fox, but he wasn't officially the Fox person. And in some markets he was in CBS, which is why
and it's so crazy because his show was like, I mean that was even before my time, but I know that his show was like wildly popular.
So popular that
like, didn't Bill Clinton go on Arsenio?
That's some people point to it as why he won, because he went on and he played saxophone and people were like, oh, he's a cool guy, I guess. Like it really helped him. And also NBC was feeling the heat from Arsenio because Arsenio was he was bringing in a lot of young people. And so it made NBC start thinking about their successor. But then when Letterman went on CBS, then it pushed Arsenio's show back to like 2 a.m. And I think Fox tried to do something. There was like Dennis Miller had a show, not on HBO before that. Chevy Chase had a show. Ugh. It was like all these people had shows.
I don't care if anybody. Oh my gosh, Chevy Chase makes me furious.
Oh, he did say he has done a lot of mean things to a lot of people.
He also, I've just never thought he was funny.
I grew up on him. Like Three Amigos is one of my favorite movies.
I mean,
but
he is not the reason why Three Amigos is good, in my opinion. Martin Short is the funniest person alive. And
I agree. Yeah.
He somehow keeps getting funnier with age.
I love him.
And I don't know how that's possible. But my parents actually just went to see Steve Martin and Martin Short's live show. They loved it.
And the Netflix special they did was taped in Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's
great. I loved both of them. But yeah, that's just all those people getting in the early 90s getting talk shows. That's why Arsenio ended up losing his show, because it just killed his ratings. There were a lot of other things too I won't go into, but it was just like unfortunate. And that was the closest we've gotten even having a person of color on a major network, in a way that totally doesn't count, because he wasn't the face of Fox. He wasn't the face of CBS. Like Letterman was the face of CBS, and Colbert is the face of CBS now. But like, we've never had that. You all have never had that. Like, when is it going to change?
I know.
And I feel like if they were to, like, it's not going to happen anytime soon, but if someone were to get on one of those major networks who was a woman or a person of color, I feel like the way people are so angry right now that I feel like it would just make everyone freak out, and maybe like screw the host over and get someone else,
I mean, yeah, people, when you're like the first or kind of one of the only ones in a particular demographic, there is just naturally a magnifying glass on you. It's the same thing. It's like if you're on a show and you're the only woman or person of color on like a stand-up show, you are the representative for that demographic.
Yeah.
Because...
And it's too much pressure.
It's, I mean... Yeah, it's like, but that, I mean, you can point to that as a reason why for a long time, in these scenes where there maybe was only like one woman on a show in different parts of the country, it's like, if she's not great, people can leave being like, see, women aren't funny. Like,
yeah,
because there's exactly one woman on the show, and she might not be good.
And people don't do that to dudes,
because there's so
particularly white dudes,
because there's so many of them.
yeah. I mean, like, there are enough black comics that I feel like it doesn't happen as much, though in a weird way I think there's some circuits where that could happen, but it really doesn't happen. I don't really hear people do that with black men. I think they do it with black women.
Yeah, I think there's a there's like a greater tradition of like black male comics who have been at the top echelon of stand-up
for so long.
Like Richard Pryor was really one of the first in like the first class of like huge stand-ups. Yeah, and I mean,
people still say he was the best. It was either him or George Carlin that people say was the best. Before people knew he was a monster, people would throw Bill Cosby in there.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and then we had Eddie. Eddie was like the Elvis of comedy, because he was, Raw did that for him. It was unreal, the sort of excitement that was surrounding him.
And like pretty much all the female comics that I grew up, like stand-up comics that I grew up with, were black women. Like Wanda Sykes.
Wanda Sykes is such an interesting voice and
saw
perspective.
Like everything that she that she did. But even like, if you go all the, like, technically, like Mom's Mabley was like on the original Tonight Show. So I think there have been so many, and there have been so many black women who have been just like absolute killers in the scene, and like don't always get the recognition that they deserve.
No, and it's interesting, like now we're starting to see it. Leslie Jones has got to host some stuff, and she hosted
Tiffany Haddish,
and I was just about to mention Tiffany Haddish, and she's getting somewhat the Hollywood treatment because she's in everything, but she's kind of like not the lead in anything. And so, which I think is interesting, because I feel like we've seen people who had a big moment like she had with Girl Trip and then get to being the lead and stuff. Which she has not had that, like I don't know, like I'm glad that it's happening in other ways, like for Kevin. Kevin Hart has gotten that treatment that traditionally white men were getting very easily. Like John Heder, he did one movie. He did the Napoleon Dynamite. And I'm not hating on him. I'm just saying he had Napoleon Dynamite, and then immediately we're going to put you in a Reese Witherspoon romantic comedy and a movie with Billy Bob Thornton when you're the co-lead, and then all these things like that. And we're going to put you in a Will Ferrell movie. Like, he was getting all that real quick. And Tiffany Haddish is sort of getting that, but she's not getting the lead opportunity. She's not the co-lead in enough.
Well, when you think about like Girls Trip was literally like last year. So she's so great. And I watched her special, and it's totally different than a lot of the stand-up that I usually watch. And I still like loved it, and I laughed so much. And, but yeah, I think it's interesting that like Chris Rock really never had that, where he was like,
that's kind of true. Yeah, he got to direct. He's
another person who I like absolutely grew up like worshiping. I loved Chris Rock.
Me too.
So much, and I still will like watch anything that he puts out.
He's about to be on Fargo. That's it.
I know.
That'll be interesting.
I'm so excited about that. But, like, he never had, even though he was clearly the top of the stand-up game, he never had that, like, Kevin Hart moment of, like, we're going to plug you into as many different creative opportunities as possible.
I agree, yeah. And it kind of was going to happen for Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
Because I heard that he was looked at for a couple of things that he...
Chappelle's show was, like, so explosive. And,
yeah. Jamie Foxx is someone who did sort of... He did get in
true.
there. So that was he wasn't like Chris Rock when it came to stand-up.
I didn't even... was he an improviser or was he a stand-up?
He did stand-up. I saw him do specials, but here's a couple of specials. But I'm not sure if he's someone who... I first saw him...
did stand-up after he became famous?
Right.
Okay.
Like, because I first saw him do anything on In Living Color.
Yeah.
Like, that's how we all came to know him. Then he got his show.
My dad was, like, obsessed with In Living Color.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Martin Lawrence is someone who got the treatment, but in very much the way they did for people in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, I think Martin Lawrence is probably in that group with, like, Bernie Mac, who's like the fucking best, and I mean, Cedric the Entertainer is still so absolutely hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, I love all those guys. Yeah. And one of the things that I really liked, Bernie Mac in Ocean's 11.
Oh my God.
And they did, like, on the DVD, they did 2 different commentaries because the cast was so big, they just didn't put them all at once. So they had 2 different groups of cast members doing the commentary. And in both, I don't think Bernie was in either, but in both of them, like, whoever was talking was like, Bernie Mac, so good.
Yeah.
So great on screen.
Wasn't
such a presence.
The Bosley in Charlie's Angels? Am I making that up?
No, he was in the sequel.
Oh, okay.
Because it was Bill Murray in the first one.
Okay.
And Bill Murray was like, I didn't enjoy this experience or working with a couple of the people I worked with. And so he was, I don't even know.
Oh, yeah, he, like, told Lucy Liu she's a bad actress or something like that.
Yeah, he didn't get along with her. I think his process is...
bad. Yeah, Bill Murray seems tough. I love him, but he doesn't.
I met him and he was like
a good hang.
I don't know because I've heard crazy stories of people hanging with him and they sounded great. And then when I met him, he was exactly what you would want him. He's the reason I wanted to do anything in acting. Like I saw it when I was 5. I was like, well, I'm an actor. You know, like I saw him in Ghostbusters. But he was real chill when I met him, but I have also heard that, like, he was at something and someone just, like, took a picture of him and he, like, threw their cell phone. So, like, he's cut from a different cloth.
Yeah.
He's a guy who, you know, he's gonna get he's just a different sort of dude.
Yeah.
And he's cut from a different cloth. I read some, like, old 1970s Rolling Stones articles that had different cast members, and they all were just different kinds of people back then.
Yeah.
And so I think I think he's just super old school and tells it like it is, and is kind of.
Yeah, that's probably it.
In a way, gruff, you know. Like, I don't really know. Not that I'm, like, defending it. I'm just saying, like, here's why I think I'm not like him, and I think it's because I was born when I was born, and I don't know. Those guys are just different kind of cats.
That's true. They'll
throw a cell phone where I would be like, I wish you wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I'm only thinking, and I'm not even saying it. So we're talking comedy, but we drifted away from talking about your comedy.
Yes.
Which is great. I love this chat. Let's get a little more in on your approach to comedy. I know you have, like, a self-deprecating thing.
Yes.
Which, I don't know if you saw Nanette.
Yes, I did.
And so when she was talking about, like, I don't want to do self-deprecating anymore, did that resonate with you at all?
No. No, that was actually something that really bothered me. And it's an opinion of hers that I think is wrong. She says that self-deprecation is humiliation. And I completely disagree with that.
I think it can be, but it depends. It's a case by case thing. She was doing that too.
She made a lot of sweeping generalizations, not only about self-deprecation, but about like comedy in general. And, you know, she said a lot of things about how like comedy like inflicts trauma on the audience by like building tension and then taking it away over and over again and things like that. But the self-deprecation thing I felt like personally attacked by, because it's such a big part of not only my stand-up but just like who I am as a person. And, you know, I am someone who like I have a very particular like upbringing and adolescence and things like that. And I really feel that like self-deprecating humor was a way for me to like take power over my own narrative.
Yeah.
And really have a sort of authority in how other people see me. And it also was a way for me to be like, this stuff doesn't hurt me anymore. I'm okay with this. I'm telling you to laugh at this.
Right.
And I think that that's a really powerful thing, and that's a really like cathartic thing about stand-up, is taking all of these things about you that maybe, you know, were not cool or were painful, and just being like, I'm okay with this. Let's all laugh about it. And that's like such an empowering thing.
I totally agree. I heard Harry Shearer say, who's done stuff on some sense if people don't know at home listening to this, and he also was in This Is Spinal Tap. He's the bassist in that. And he was saying people get into comedy so they can control the way people laugh at them.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And because I hate when I'm laughed at for something when it's out of my control and I feel like it's not a fair representation, or they're just getting made fun of.
That is a huge reason why a lot of us do this. I include myself in that. You know, if you like, so many of us, I mean, bullying is like a pretty universal experience, but it's like so many of us who do this were bullied and, you know, had like rough teenage years and shit like that. And I just think that self-deprecating humor is just, you know, it shouldn't be a crutch. It shouldn't be your whole thing, because then it gets kind of like exhausting and repetitive. And I totally agree with that. But I was, I disagree with Hannah Gadsby's point about that. And I don't, you know, I've had a lot of discussions about, and I haven't really heard anyone in comedy come out and defend that point in particular as having any sort of saliency.
I don't know. It's one of those topics where I'm like, can we talk about Nanette? Can we openly have any criticism of it?
Another hour.
Because I've heard people rave about it, but they're all people, even if they were entertainers, were not stand-up comics or, you know, comedy writers. They were all like actors. Or a friend of mine who just enjoys watching comedy. Like, they're all raving about it. And my thing was, I hadn't seen it yet. And all these people are like, I knew it was a new comedy special. Right? Like, I knew it was billed that way. And all these people were saying, it's amazing, it's amazing. So I was thinking bigger and blacker. You know, this is what I was like, this is going to be a laugh a minute. And it's like, not that. It's like maybe in the 69 minutes, it's like 10 laughs purposefully. You know, she's not, you know, she spends the last 20 minutes saying she's quitting comedy. So, I mean, you know.
Yeah, and she's not even quitting now, which is, it's a whole thing. But it's like, I know there are some stand-up comedians who liked it. My friend Kate Willett, who's an amazing stand-up, really loved it. And she saw it live, and she had nothing but great things to say about it. Yasser Lester really loved it. I saw that on Twitter. I know Ian Carmel really liked it too. Like, I know there are like great stand-ups who I love and respect who enjoyed it. But
I thought it was profound and very thought-provoking.
I do too. I thought it was like a great piece of art that was not stand-up, and that's fine.
Exactly.
And it's like very much in the tradition of sort of...
It was the funniest TED Talk I've ever seen.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, there's a lot of, I think, UK stand-up that's like that, and Australian stand-up too, which is like, you know, and there are so many great comedians on both sides of the ocean, but one of my good friends, Charlie Pickering, is an Australian comedian, and he hosts Australia's version of The Daily Show.
Oh, cool.
And when he comes to New York, he does shows, and like every Australian expat like comes out of the woodwork to see him. And he has it's not like Nanette at all, but it's very much about ideas and telling a story and having like cohesive material, and I think that's more the emphasis than like bigger and blacker, a laugh a minute.
Right, yeah. Or like even Cosby, before we hated him, was his stand-up as he got older got more and more storyteller. Right. Where you were just getting built up to a big laugh as opposed to try to get a laugh every 8 seconds like Steve Harvey. You know, like there's just like different approaches. Yeah. And I respect that.
I think it's I have a lot of, again, we could be here forever about Nanette, but it's fine.
I think I respect it. I respect her.
She kept saying how funny she was throughout the special, and then had so few jokes, and I
had a problem with that, and I had a problem with the people saying, and this isn't
people
even her fault, that it's the future of comedy
or
and all that
change
stuff.
stand-up comedy forever.
Or that it's the only way you should do comedy. Yeah. And I hate that narrative in comedy right now of like, this is what comedy should be. Comedy can be whatever someone wants. There's so many approaches.
But it's like, those are the people who are writing those clickbait reviews, essentially. I think that a lot of them, admittedly, the people who write those reviews admittedly do not watch much stand-up. So it's like the people who are like...
I don't know how much they admit it, but...
No, I've literally, I've read, even Emily Nussbaum did an interview with Hannah Gadsby and on the New Yorker Radio Hour, and, it was clear from what she said that she doesn't watch a ton of stand-up anyways, and she it's within everyone's right to love Nanette, and it's whatever.
Oh,
but
gosh, I certainly don't think
there's so much great stand-up out there, and I think that stand-up is such a disrespected art form to begin with, and it's like, I can't remember who said this. Oh, Kath Barbadaro said that she feels like the only way that people get critical acclaim for a stand-up special is when they take all of the jokes out of it. And it's like, there have been similar like Hassan Minaj's special was kind of like that. Neil Brennan's 3 Mics. I don't know. It's a lot, but I just think that like people don't respect stand-up to begin with. So anytime they see something that's not stand-up, they're like, oh my God, I love this.
Yeah. And I don't...
That's frustrating.
And that's what I'm picking up on in what you're saying, is that it's frustrating that people are inherently so disrespectful, but then also overlooking so many things. Yeah. And that's what I get frustrated by, is that people are overlooking so many things, including the fact that people are different. Yeah. And that there are people who are going to like one style, and it's nothing against the merit of that style or the people who do that style or the special that's real popular within that style. It's just whatever is your cup of tea. Conan O'Brien has said that for him, and I'm paraphrasing, so I hope no one takes this the wrong way, but he was saying for him, he doesn't want to use comedy to make a point. He said this years ago, and somebody did take that out of context to say, oh, he's firing shots at Daily Show and Colbert Report, and he wasn't. He was just saying, that's just not my approach. I don't do political comedy or whatever. I completely
agree, and a lot of times, I think when certain people know me from Twitter, I've had this happen a few times where people who follow me on Twitter come to see me do stand-up, and they are like, I really expected you to talk about politics, and you didn't at all.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would like people to laugh. Like, I don't talk about politics in my act because I usually think it's bad.
Depressing.
Yeah, and it's like people are so desperate to laugh right now that I think it's like, a disservice to the audience to make them think more about how shitty the world is.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't need more of that right now. And so much of politics is not funny right now.
Right.
It's
I don't know how you could really...
Parody. It's beyond parody because it's already the most hyperbolic version of itself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a very good point. Because it really is like the joke that people would have made 5 years ago is like what this actually is. All the fears that we had are actually what's coming to pass here. And it's hard to be funny about that.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just tough.
And there are other things that are funny that we can talk about.
Right. And when I do talk about stuff, it's kind of like how people respond to it. You know, it's like, so it's not even so much the politics of it itself. It's the human behavior in it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a traditional aspect of comedy.
Right.
To talk about human behavior. But I'm never one to say comedy should just be this, because I think we need to be more well-versed than that. You know, some days I need just a big old laugh, and some days I want to have like something a little more thoughtful. Like, that's fine. Like, that's why I never understood the like fight that people are trying to make between Colbert and Fallon. Like, they can coexist. Like, it doesn't have to be...
Yeah, of course.
And plus people are like ridiculous because they say it's because Fallon had Trump on. It's like, Colbert had Trump on too.
Yeah.
Like, you're a hypocrite and a weirdo, and you probably not watch neither show.
Exactly.
But, you know, like, the thing that was so great about Colbert was particularly Colbert Report's his, like, ability to lampoon politics.
Well,
and
that
people
was,
want
I mean,
that.
yeah, people want that for sure, but it was... I always thought that the Colbert Report was better than the Daily Show for this reason, because it's kind of 1 degree removed because of Stephen Colbert, the character.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you know that he's in character, and there's this sort of like suspension of disbelief about that, and it is so ridiculous. Whereas, like, you know, Jon Stewart was telling it like it is, and you know, he was funny, but it was like it never got to the level that Colbert had, in my opinion, just because Colbert had so much more freedom within the character.
I love both, but I did prefer Colbert, and even one year when Daily Show won, then even Jon Stewart accepting the Emmy was like, I really thought it was going to be Colbert this year, because they were really killing it with their Iraq stuff, you know, whatever it was. And I agreed. I think... I just think things need to like coexist. Like, sometimes I want that, and sometimes I want a break from that. You know, like, that's what's good about having Fallon on the other channel, or like going Fallon to Seth Meyers. Like, you get both if you just watch 2 hours. You know, like, that's what I need. You know, that's what I want. And I don't really like what I see happening in comedy on Twitter. Specifically, it's mostly going on Twitter and on blogs, which is this sort of it's really like the way people are in Washington, with the way they spin things to try to win for their tribe. Yeah,
Twitter is like uniquely horrible, and I'm on it all the time, and I'm very addicted to it, but it's not helping the discourse in any subject, and so, you know, periodically I'll try to take a break from it, but
digital cleanses are good to take. But
I mean, I don't talk about taking things with a grain of salt. Anything that's happening on Twitter, you just have to be like, this is not real life, and go take a shower.
Agreed. Let's end the podcast with talking about something that we could create, figuring out something we could create. And one thing I thought of, and you can come up with a better idea, I'm sure, and if you do, mention it. But I'm trying to figure out, one thing I'm trying to figure out is that sort of process of writing a good, solid joke, especially if you're going to these open mics where you can't really get a good gauge from the audience on it. Obviously, sometimes just when you you speak your ideas out loud, then you go, oh, I see how, like, this doesn't work. But what is a joke writing process that you maybe use? I know a lot of people like to write on stage and riff, but
I mean, if I'm riffing at all, it's not to write a joke. It's just to kind of comment on something that's happening in the room or something like that. But I don't write on stage. A lot of my jokes now, because I tweet so much, a lot of them do start out as tweets, just like the idea. And then I'll sort of like flesh it out a little bit more that way. But for a few of them that haven't, like sometimes I'll write jokes about things that I don't really want to tweet about. Like if I get, like I got ghosted by a dude and I didn't really want to tweet about it in case he saw.
Oh yeah.
So I honestly write at open mics a lot, and you know, I have a lot of friends who are really sort of diligent about writing at home. My friend JP McDade, who's so fucking funny, is great about that. And I know that he's like a workhorse and writes everywhere all the time. But usually it's like I don't have like a sit down thing, and I'm just like, oh, that's sort of funny, I should write that down, and then I'll go to an open mic, and being in the room with everyone about to go up makes me like right.
Yeah, fires your creativity. Yeah.
So I don't have a good process. I think that's what we've come to.
What goes through your mind when you have like a premise, and then you want to make it funny, you want to add that the joke side to it, the funny side to it? What goes through your mind?
So it's usually like the premise is already funny to me. I think that's like a huge thing. That's another reason why I don't have any jokes about politics, because it's not funny. The premise is not funny.
So give me an example of like a funny premise, because sometimes I can see humor in the situation, but the premise isn't necessarily funny on its own.
Okay. So the joke that I've been opening with for a while now is about my dad and how he's like really smart, but he has a really thick Boston accent, and those two things like really cancel each other out. And that was like the juxtaposition of those two kind of opposing things was funny to me inherently, because I have heard him say so many he like has a master's degree, and I've heard him say so many like very intelligent things just sounding like a garbage collector and just like a trash man. And I don't know, he's like a working class guy who happens to be very like kind of very advanced ideas. What I'm saying sounds incredibly classist, but just he is, you know, he has this very working class accent, I should say, but is very smart. It's like, I mean, it's the reason why Good Will Hunting exists. Is because like people are just like, this guy with this accent can think thoughts, what? And so yeah, I just kind of fleshed it out from there. But it's something like that. It's like, you know, like juxtaposing two maybe discordant ideas, and or, you know, a typical setup punchline is just like a twist. That's all. So
you're immediately going at it from like just what's funny.
Yeah.
And what's the funny way? That's something that, I don't know if you watch Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, but in the episode with Dana Carvey was saying like, I'm trying to work on this joke. And he tells it, and Jerry Seinfeld says, it's too long of a beginning. Like, the setup is too long. Like, what's the funniest way to get in? And then he said, here's just what I have. So he just real succinctly says, like, here's just the funniest way to just bring up that topic. Yeah. And I think that's what you're naturally doing. I
am a very short joke writer. My jokes are short and pretty tight, I think. Like, I mean, they're just succinct. Like, when I have like a 30-minute set, I'm doing 20 jokes. So it's like, I'm not really exploring the space with my jokes and stuff like that, you know? So that's, I mean, everybody's different, and yeah.
But you attack things from a funny point of view, and I think you're in. not succinct like you, and
I think I'm just,
wish I was. But
I'm just not smart enough to like start with an idea.
Or maybe you're
funny.
just smarter than everybody else. Well, there it is. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Clearly, we enjoyed having a conversation. I hope you all enjoyed listening to that conversation. If you want to know more about Julia Claire, you can go to her website, julia-claire.com. You can also follow her on Twitter at @OJuliaTweets and on Instagram at Julia Claire Grams. So a couple of places to see what she's up to. Definitely go see her perform if you get the chance in the city. Oh, and here's something related to me. I'm on a couple of friends' podcasts called Church Stories coming up sometime soon. I don't have a date on that yet, but once I do, I'll let you know, and I'll share it with you all on Twitter and Facebook, which you can follow us at There It Is Pod, and you can also follow me on Twitter at JasonFarJokes and on Instagram at JasonFarPics. So be on the lookout for that. That was really cool. Well, fun episode next week. I hope you're back for it. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.